The dangers of ideology. First, we need to understand what is meant by ideology. This is a complex topic, so definitions vary slightly, but ideology can be understood as a set of values, beliefs, and attitudes that help us make sense of reality. These beliefs are based upon how one thinks the world currently works and how it ought to be. This ought is where the problems arise, and we will go into them in more depth shortly. Let's look quickly at some examples to remind ourselves of where ideology may be present in our lives. We'll then look at the appeal of ideology and the dangers that it can entail for us as individuals. Firstly, a simple example of ideology seen within society is capitalism. Generally, capitalists believe that the world works based off of competition, and along with this, they believe that it ought to. They believe that this is the best way for a society to function. Some more tenets of capitalism is its focus on individualism, that is, every man for himself, and also market freedom. Next, Marxism. This ideology is not as immediately obvious in our society, but it was extremely influential in the 20th century. Some of the core beliefs of Marxism is its focus on cooperation, collectivism, and social responsibility. Again, Marxists believe that this is the way society ought to be. Finally, one that is typically overlooked and taken for granted is the ideology of Scientism. Scientism is closely correlated to rationalism and logical positivism. Scientism is the excessive belief in the power of science. It is the idea all of our problems can and will eventually be solved by science. This ideology focuses on continued progress rather than reflection, a very interesting and important idea that we discussed in a previous video, Eastern and Western Ideals of Happiness by Bertrand Russell. Following on from this, it believes that it is our duty to go where science takes us. In other words, science will lead us to the best possible life. Finally, some other examples are the patriarchy, feminism, atheism, Nazism, nihilism, cynicism, pacifism, dieting, veganism, libertarianism, conservatism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Judaism. I hope you get the idea that almost anything can be turned into an ideology and hence transform us into becoming ideological. Before we explore some of the problems of ideology, we need to understand why we have them in the first place, what function do they serve, and what is their appeal. Firstly, ideologies make us feel like we understand the world and know what is going on around us. In other words, they bring order to chaos. Similarly, we feel that we can explain it all and are able to conceptualize and articulate what is going on in the world, who is good, who is bad, what is right, and what is wrong. Also, ideologies allow us to pass on responsibility. We'll see why this is such a problem later. Finally, ideologies give us a clear identity. It is easy for us to define ourselves in this way. We can say, yes, this is who I am. I'm a capitalist, I'm a feminist, a vegan, and so on. Now we'll move on to why ideology is a problem and why it is important not to be ideological. Bear in mind that it's not so much the content of the ideology that is the problem. What is actually the problem is being ideological. Firstly, ideologies mask a weakness of will, otherwise known as acrasia. Many of us do not want to question our own beliefs and go through the journey of personal introspection and questioning everything around us in order to understand who we really are and what reality really is. Instead, we adopt an ideology that gives us ready-made answers to all of this. Instead of doing any genuine inquiry, we just take some ready-made answers so we can skip all the hard work. But this lack of authenticity can cause great suffering for the individual, as we will see throughout the next few problems. Next, they prevent genuine inquiry and personal development. As you said before, ideology means that people have ready-made answers to questions, so there is no need for them to inquire into it and to try and genuinely explore the question. And even if they do decide to research into the question, it's likely to be biased in order to confirm the ready-made answer. Hence, it will be hard for us to ever develop because it locks us into a single perspective and stops us from openly exploring new perspectives. Next, ideologies seem to be absolutely and obvious true to the person holding them, mainly due to confirmation bias. So again, why would they go out of their way to do any actual research if they already know the absolute truth? This can be dangerous because they become closed-minded and even aggressive to other points of view, and a division is created between these people. Those who are good and those, that other group, that are evil and wrong. Ideologies also oversimplify, that is, they give us a one-bit answer to everything. This combination between dividing one group as the good and the other group as the bad one, combined with the oversimplification of this division, can be deadly and can become murderous. This is because one group will categorize the entire other group as wrong, evil and guilty, and all these people in the other group will be judged as a unit and punished as a unit. Also, as we said earlier, ideologies can cause suffering for the individual because in order to maintain the ideology, you have to constantly self-deceive and manipulate your actions and thoughts in such a way that it confirms what you think the truth already is. It can cause us to become neurotic. As we said before, one of the purposes of ideology is to give us a sense of identity, or more specifically, egoic identity. This is a problem because the ideology is no more than a mask, a deception, a distraction from our true nature. If we took some time to self-reflect and do some self-inquiry, we would realise that all of these traits we assign to ourselves are fickle and ever-changing. If we look past the masks and facades that the ideologies provide us, we will see that we don't really know who we are. We come face to face with our innate emptiness. This is a scary thing to face, and so many distract themselves from it with self-deception techniques. For example, identifying the ego with a particular ideology. Another important idea to explore is how people tend to idolize leaders and how we can be careful not to fall into this trap. It is when we get to the point of trying to emulate every one of the leader's actions and traits and effectively try to become the leader himself. It is here where we become ideological. When we no longer have a sense of personal individuality or uniqueness, instead we completely devote our lives to doing everything the leader says and does. We become the leader's mouthpiece, his caricature, his puppet. When following the teachings of leaders, we must take them and apply them to our own unique path in life and apply them in a way that helps us awaken who we truly are. We are not truly our leader. We have our own path and so does he. We can learn from him and his teachings, but in a way that applies to our own path. Solzhenitsyn, the renowned Russian novelist, referenced the danger of ideology in his famous book, The Gulag Archipelago. He writes, "Ideology, that is what gives evil doing its long-sought justification and gives the evildoer the necessary steadfastness and determination. That is the social theory which helps to make his acts seem good instead of bad in his own and others' eyes, so that he won't hear reproaches and curses, but will receive praise and honours." Thanks to ideology, the 20th century was fated to experience evildoing on a scale calculated in the millions. This cannot be denied, nor passed over, nor suppressed. Without evildoers, there would have been no archipelago. Finally, we must look at the solutions and how we cannot succumb to the problems of ideology. Firstly, we need to make a continuous effort to thoroughly question our biases, our assumptions and beliefs that we hold as sacred. We must see how we are closing our mind off to the world and deceiving ourselves of its true nature and its complexity. Another crucial thing to remember is to be open-minded and inquisitive into all areas of our lives. Spend time contemplating and really thinking about everything around you, who you are, what society is, what thoughts are, and so on. Next, we must learn to be okay with not knowing. Don't pretend and deceive yourselves that you know everything. If one acts as if they know everything, then deep down it is likely that they are insecure about their lack of genuine insight and curiosity. But once you accept that you know nothing, which takes great courage to do, you can truly start to question everything with a genuine curiosity. And finally, focus on unconditional love and understanding. Don't divide the world up into good and bad. Understand where the other side is coming from, and for the bad that you see in them, you need to try and recognize it in yourself too. We constantly turn a blind eye to our own evil, even though we are eager to point it out in others. It's of utmost importance to recognize this bias in order for us and the world to become free of divisions and instead learn to understand and to love each other. Thank you very much for watching, and be sure to like if you found the video useful, and subscribe for weekly videos every Saturday. See you next time on Feeling Philosophical, and goodbye.